I remember the sky that morning. It was too blue for bad news. The kind of blue that makes you want to open every window in the house, wrap your hands around a mug of coffee, and just breathe. Birds chirped like they'd rehearsed for weeks. The lake shimmered with an early sunlight that made it look almost liquid gold. I should have felt peace. I should have felt home. Instead, I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the spring breeze as my uncle stepped onto my porch with an envelope in his hand. "Happy birthday, Marin," he said, his voice too flat, too rehearsed. "I'm Marin, 32 today. I've lived in this lakeside cottage for a decade, turning it from a decaying, forgotten relic of the past into something that finally felt like it belonged to me, even if, technically, it didn't. The place had been my grandmother's, and after she passed, no one else in the family cared enough to claim it. No one except me. So I did what no one else wanted to do. I stayed. I worked. I sanded every floorboard, painted every wall, cleared out spiders the size of teacups, and breathed life back into the house with every paycheck I scraped together. Over time, I made it mine. Or at least I thought I had. I looked down at the envelope in my uncle's hand, that cheap, government tissue beige that practically screamed bad news. He held it out like it was nothing more than a birthday card. I didn't take it right away. "What is it?" I asked. "You should probably read it," he replied, avoiding my eyes. That told me everything I needed to know. Whatever this was, it wasn't good. I took the envelope with trembling fingers, broke the seal, unfolded the letter inside. And then the world went very, very still. It was a formal notice to vacate. An official, lawyer-signed, deadline-stamped letter telling me I had 60 days to leave the only home I'd known in my adult life. My name wasn't on the deed. The cottage was still legally part of my late grandmother's estate, and now someone, my cousin Rhea, was forcing the sale. She wanted to sell it to a commercial property group, the letter said. The deal was already in motion. No. No, this can't be right, I stammered, the paper rattling in my hands. There must be a mistake. I've lived here for 10 years. I've invested everything into this place. My uncle looked pained, but his hands stayed in his pockets. "I'm sorry, Marin. I didn't want to be the one to bring this to you, but legally, there's nothing stopping her." "Legally," I snapped. "So that's it. After everything I've done, it's just gone." He didn't answer. I stared at the letter, disbelief giving way to something darker, something heavier. Anger was starting to bloom, slow and hot, at the base of my spine. Rhea did this. He nodded, my cousin Rhea. She hadn't even called me for my birthday. No message, no half-hearted Facebook post. But apparently she had no problem evicting me with the efficiency of a corporate machine. And the worst part, she didn't even tell me herself. She sent my uncle, her father, to do the dirty work. I folded the letter carefully, deliberately. Slid it back into the envelope like it might burn me if I moved too fast. "Why now?" I asked. She never gave a damn about this place. Why does she care all of a sudden? Uncle Glenn shifted uncomfortably, and that's when I saw it. Guilt. She and Mason, they're starting a new phase of their life. You know, building wealth, making investments. Apparently this property caught the interest of some developers they know. "Developers," I repeated. "Wait, Mason, her new husband, he's behind this." Uncle Glenn's silence was answer enough. The name of the buyer wasn't included in the letter. Just the vague, sanitized phrase, "a commercial property group." But now the pieces were clicking together, falling into place with horrifying clarity. Mason. I'd met him a handful of times, always polished, always charming, always talking in vague terms about business opportunities and market potential. I hadn't liked him, but I'd smiled and nodded for Rhea's sake. She looked happy after all. She looked like someone who thought she was finally winning at life. But now I saw it. The win wasn't love, it was strategy. Rhea hadn't married up, she'd married into a company, into access, into money. And Mason, he hadn't just taken Rhea's hand, he'd taken my home. I stood on the porch in stunned silence, the lake glinting behind me like it didn't care. I could hear a fish jump in the distance. Somewhere nearby, a lawnmower started. The world kept going, utterly indifferent. Uncle Glenn cleared his throat. "I'm sorry, Marin, if there was anything I could do." But there wasn't, not anymore. "Tell Rhea," I said, my voice low and steady, that I got her message loud and clear. I turned and went inside, shutting the door behind me with finality. He didn't knock again. He didn't need to. I dropped the envelope on the kitchen table and stared at it like it might rewrite itself if I waited long enough. But the words stayed the same. 60 days, vacate the property, final notice. My mind raced, pulling threads together. The improvements I'd made, none of them protected me. The plumbing, the deck, the roof, everything had come out of my pocket. There were no receipts that would save me, no claim to the land. I'd never pushed for the legal transfer of ownership because, stupidly, I thought family meant something. I thought Rhea would never do this to me. But family was a funny thing. When there's money on the table, blood gets thin real quick. I picked up my phone, scrolled through my contacts until I found her name. Rhea, no heart emoji, no friendly nicknames, just Rhea. I hesitated for half a second, then hit call. It rang once. Twice. Straight to voicemail. "Hi, you've reached Rhea. Leave a message or shoot me a text." I hung up before the beep. What was I going to say anyway? "Hey, thanks for kicking me out on my birthday. Hope your marriage is as soulless as your real estate deals." Instead, I paced the kitchen. The tile beneath my feet, laid with my own hands, suddenly felt foreign. Not mine, not anymore. They wanted my home? Fine. But they were going to take it from someone who wouldn't go quietly. If they thought I'd roll over and disappear, they didn't know me at all. I looked around the space I'd built. The wooden beams I'd sanded until my arms ached. The open shelving I'd stained with tears and sawdust. Every inch of this place had a story, a memory, and now it was being bought and sold like a product on a shelf. I wouldn't let that go unpunished. They gave me a birthday gift, all right, but it wasn't the one they thought. It was the kind that ignites something cold and sharp in your chest, something that doesn't fade. They gave me a reason, and I intended to return the favor. If I'd been alone, I might have crumbled. The weight of betrayal like that doesn't hit all at once. It builds, slow and suffocating, until you either break or fight back. And I was dangerously close to breaking. But then Imani showed up. She didn't even knock, just stormed in with a bag of groceries, a bottle of wine, and that look on her face that said, "Spill it or I'll make you." I'd known Imani since we were 7. She was the kind of friend who didn't wait to be asked. She just knew when to show up. She set the groceries down on the counter and popped the cork on the wine like we were celebrating, not spiraling. "Okay," she said, pouring 2 glasses. "Start from the top." I didn't even make it through the second paragraph of the eviction letter before the tears came. I wasn't the kind of person who cried often, but something about reading the words out loud, hearing them echo in my kitchen like a death sentence, made it real in a way it hadn't been before. Imani didn't interrupt. She didn't hug me or try to fix it. She just listened. That's what made her dangerous in the best way. She paid attention. When I was done, she took a long sip of wine and then narrowed her eyes like she was about to interrogate a suspect. "So let me get this straight," she said slowly. "Your cousin Rhea, who hasn't even set foot in this house in 10 years, decides now's the time to sell it, on your birthday, to a mystery developer. And Mason, the Prince of Smug, just happens to be in business with that company." I nodded, wiping my nose with the sleeve of my sweatshirt. "Apparently." Imani raised an eyebrow. "You believe in coincidences." "Not anymore." "Good," she said, setting down her glass with a soft clink. "Then let's get to work." I blinked. "What do you mean?" "I mean," she said, already pulling her laptop from her tote bag, "if they want to play dirty, we can play smarter. There's always a trail, Marin. You just have to follow it." And so we started digging. In the beginning, it felt hopeless. I didn't know what I was looking for, just that something about all of it felt wrong. Too polished. Too fast. I remembered Mason once bragging about how he could push a deal through zoning before the ink's dry. Back then, it had sounded impressive. Now, it sounded criminal. Still, it wasn't until Tessa came back that things really started to change. I hadn't spoken to my sister in over 3 years. We weren't on bad terms, exactly. We just existed in separate orbits. She'd moved to the city for law school, married a man none of us liked, then divorced him quietly before disappearing into the kind of corporate legal job that sounded too complicated to explain. I didn't call her, she didn't call me. That was the deal. But somehow, word got to her. Maybe through Imani, maybe through our uncle. All I know is that one night, just as I was closing the laptop after another dead-end search, headlights swept across my porch. Tessa knocked once before letting herself in. "Still use the same hide key," she said, brushing her hair back and stepping inside like she hadn't been gone for years. I stared at her. She looked different. Sharper. Like someone who'd spent a long time learning how not to show weakness. "Tessa," I said slowly, "what are you doing here?" She set her coat down, looked me straight in the eye, and said, "I heard what Rhea did, and I'm not letting her get away with it." There wasn't a hug, no teary reunion. But she sat down at the table, pulled out her iPad, and asked to see every document I had. That was her way of saying I'm here now. Between Imani's instincts and Tessa's legal precision, we started to peel the layers back. The first thing we found was a zoning complaint. On paper, it looked official. Some anonymous neighbor citing safety concerns and property degradation. But there was one problem: the date on the form. It was filed a week after I'd installed a brand new retaining wall with city permits and everything. There was no degradation. In fact, the place had never looked better. Tessa leaned in, narrowing her eyes. "You said you handled the construction personally." "Yeah," I replied. "Hired a contractor. I even submitted the completion notice to the city myself." "Then this complaint is fraudulent," she said, tapping the screen. "And I have a feeling it's not the only one." She was right. Over the next few days, the list grew. Duplicate zoning filings, backdated permits, and signatures that didn't match the original estate documentation. Someone had been manipulating the paperwork, probably to create a narrative that the house was deteriorating, unsafe, unfit for habitation. "Classic justification strategy," Tessa muttered. "Make the property look like a liability, so the sale looks like a solution." And then we found it, the clause. It was buried deep in the original will. Not the scanned version the family used, but a hard copy Tessa requested from the county archives. I watched her eyes flick back and forth across the page until she stopped suddenly, her finger tracing the sentence slowly. "Here," she said, "listen to this." She read aloud. "In the event that my granddaughter Marin is residing in the property known as 143 Crystal Bend Road at the time of my passing, the title may be transferred in full to her name, provided that she maintain residence for 5 consecutive years and pays all local property taxes during that time." My heart stopped. "I've been here 10 years, I whispered. "And I bet you've paid every single tax bill," she said, flipping her iPad around. I pulled the records. "You did. This clause means you should have been the legal owner years ago." "Then why wasn't the transfer ever filed?" I asked. Tessa's mouth twisted into something grim. "Because someone didn't want you to know it existed. And if I had to guess, it's someone with access to both the will and the connections to hide it." "Rhea," Imani said, "or Mason." Tessa nodded. "Or both." It was hard to breathe. The fury had settled deep in my bones, by then, cold, methodical, coiling tighter with each new discovery. But then something unexpected happened. The enemy had a brother. His name was Caleb. Younger than Mason by a few years, but leagues apart in every other way. Where Mason was smug and suited up and spoke in empty metaphors about vision, Caleb was direct, sharp-witted, and somehow disillusioned with the whole operation. We met by accident. I was at the town record office, digging through more files, when a guy in jeans and a flannel shirt leaned over and said, "You're not going to find what you're looking for in that drawer." I looked up, irritated. "Excuse me." He gave a small smile. "Sorry, just, if it's about the Crystal Bend property, most of those files were moved to private storage 3 months ago. Not city-initiated, though. Someone paid for the removal." My stomach dropped. "You work here." "Number used to. Now I mostly run tech logistics for the company my idiot brother works with." I tilted my head. "Idiot brother." He laughed once. "Mason. The golden boy." I didn't react, but something in my face must have given it away. He blinked. "Wait, are you Marin?" I hesitated. Who's asking? Caleb, he extended a hand. And before you ask, I'm not here to screw you over. Honestly, I've been wondering when someone would start asking questions. Over coffee that same afternoon, he confirmed what we suspected. Mason had been planning this sale for months. The forged documents? Mason knew about them. The zoning complaints? Filed using a backdoor connection through a buddy in planning and development. Mason thought no one would notice, Caleb said, running a hand through his hair. And to be fair, usually no one does. These kinds of deals are quiet, surgical, but he underestimated you. Why are you telling me this? I asked. He shrugged. Because I'm sick of watching him win. It was strange, trusting someone from the other side of the line, but Caleb didn't feel like the enemy. He felt like someone who had lived too long in someone else's shadow and finally wanted to burn it down. With his help, we traced the financial connection between Mason and the property group. Silent partnership, shell corporations, hidden shares filed under a consulting firm registered out of state. But the paper trail was there. We had everything we needed now: motive, evidence, and a clause that gave me rightful ownership. But more than that, we had momentum. And I was done playing defense. There's a moment just before you burn the whole house down when the world goes still. Your heart stops racing. Your hands go steady. You remember who you are. That moment came to me the night of Ria's engagement gala. The place looked like something out of a magazine spread. Crystal chandeliers casting golden light over 100 polished smiles, servers in white gloves floating between tables with trays of champagne, and a string quartet playing something pretentious in the background. The venue was a private estate up in the hills, all marble staircases and manicured gardens, rented for one night at a price that could have bought a small house. Ria, of course, was the star. She wore white, as if she was already playing bride. Her dress shimmered with sequins that caught the light every time she turned, and her smile had the sharp glint of a woman who believed she had already won. She hadn't seen me yet. That was by design. I waited until the speeches started, until Ria's father took the mic and began toasting her brilliance, her astute eye for real estate, her keen sense of legacy. Imani was beside me, poised with a phone camera, capturing every word. Tessa stood near the back, legal brief tucked inside her handbag like a concealed weapon. Caleb was by the bar, watching the room like a hawk. And me? I stood just off the patio in a slate blue dress, hair pulled back, eyes locked on the stage like a sniper waiting for the right second to breathe. Ria raised her champagne glass to thank the crowd. That's when I walked up the steps. "Sorry to interrupt," I said, loud enough to silence the applause. "But I think there's something everyone here deserves to know." Ria turned slowly, her face barely concealing the twitch of confusion, followed by panic. "Marin, what are you?" "Funny thing about family," I continued, taking the mic from her stunned father. "They know where the bodies are buried, and sometimes they dig them up." The room was silent, even the music stopped. Imani kept filming, steady as stone. I pulled the first document from my clutch. "This," I said, "is the original copy of our grandmother's will, the complete version, not the one you passed around the family. This one includes a clause that would have made me the rightful owner of the lakeside cottage, 10 years ago, had it not been deliberately ignored." Gasps, whispered names, the sound of someone putting down a glass a little too fast. I pulled out the next sheet. "These are tax records, all paid, by me, every year, meeting the exact conditions of the will." Another document, and here we have a zoning complaint, supposedly filed due to structural hazards. Filed under an anonymous neighbor, who doesn't exist. The property in question had recently passed inspection, with permits on file. Ria's voice cracked. "This isn't Marin, whatever you think you found." "I'm not done," I said sharply. She shut her mouth. "Then we have this lovely string of forged signatures," I said, displaying blown-up scans on the screen Caleb had synced to the projector. "Notice how the pen pressure, spacing, and even the shape of the S all change depending on the document. Convenient, right? Almost like someone was trying to fabricate consent from the family estate to push through a sale they weren't authorized to make." Someone from the back murmured, "That's illegal." Very, Tessa said dryly, stepping forward now. And inadmissible in court, if not brought to light until now. I held up the final sheet. This is a financial statement. It shows a shell company registered in Delaware where our lovely Mason here, I gestured toward him, happens to be a silent partner. That same company is the one pushing to buy and demolish the lakeside property. Which, of course, would make him quite a bit of money. Rhea looked like she might faint. Mason, red-faced and seething, stepped forward. This is a setup. Oh no, Caleb said from the bar. This is an exposé, big difference. You little traitor, Mason snarled. And you, I interrupted, are about to be under investigation. Because I've already handed copies of every document to the local zoning board, the property commission, and, I smiled, the state attorney general's office. The room erupted, not into cheers, not yet, it was chaos. Murmurs, accusations, people turning to each other with stunned expressions. I watched it all like I was behind glass, calm, quiet, untouched by the frenzy. Rhea was frozen, mouth slightly open, eyes darting as if looking for a way out. I walked past her, handed the mic back to the stunned MC, and whispered, "Happy engagement." And then I left the stage. Outside, the air was cool and electric. Imani caught up to me first, hugging me so hard I nearly dropped my bag. "You did it," she whispered. "You actually did it." "I know," I said, letting out a shaky breath. "I can't feel my knees." Tessa joined us, her heels clicking on the stone steps. That was legally sound and emotionally devastating. "I'm proud." I laughed a little hysterically. High praise. A few minutes later, Caleb appeared, hands in his pockets. "They're imploding in there." I looked up. How bad? Well, the investors want blood. Mason tried to blame it all on Rhea, and Rhea tried to cry her way out of it. Neither went well. And the family. Most of them walked out, he said. Uncle Charles called Rhea a disgrace. Aunt Lydia told her she was as transparent as a plastic spoon. The wedding's off. Invitations are already being shredded. I didn't feel joy exactly. I didn't dance or celebrate. What I felt was clean. Like the rot had finally been scraped away and I could breathe again. "Thank you," I said to Caleb. He shrugged. "Mason had it coming. I just gave you a flashlight." "No," I said. "You chose a side." "That matters." He looked at me for a long moment. "So what now?" I stared out at the hills, their silhouettes washed in moonlight. "Now, I go home, and I make sure no one ever tries to take it away from me again. Some victories are loud, fireworks, confetti, cheers. Others are quiet, like a sunrise over water. My win was both. It didn't happen overnight. In fact, the legal process was grueling, an uphill battle of paperwork, court dates, and testimony. But the truth, once unearthed, has a way of holding its ground. Thanks to the documents we uncovered, and Tessa's relentless legal support, I was finally recognized as the rightful owner of the lakeside cottage. The buried clause in my grandmother's will held up in court, and with it, the transfer of title. The forged signatures and shady zoning complaints helped build a compelling case of fraud and coercion. Mason's company was investigated, fined, and forced to withdraw all claims on the land. By the time the dust settled, the deed was in my name. Fully, officially, legally. The first thing I did was walk through every room of the cottage. It was still standing, mostly untouched. The company hadn't gotten far, just some preliminary fencing and inspection markings on the property lines. But inside, it looked like a time capsule of grief. The pictures had been taken down. My furniture, boxed up by movers who assumed I wouldn't be back. Even the air smelled different, like it didn't know if it should welcome me home or brace for goodbye again. I stood in the living room, sunlight streaming through the wide lake-facing windows, and let the silence settle over me. My hands brushed the frame of the door I'd repainted last summer. My knees touched the worn rug I'd thrifted in college. Every corner held a story. "I'm home," I whispered. That night I lit a fire in the hearth, just like I used to. The next few weeks were a whirlwind, some legal, some emotional, all exhausting. People started showing up again. Not to take, but to give. The first was Tessa. She pulled into the driveway with a car full of tools and didn't even wait for me to answer the door. "Floorboards in the guest room are loose," she said by way of greeting. "I brought a drill." "You hate power tools." "Yeah, but I love redemption arcs." I hugged her for the first time in years. Then came Imani, with her boho chic flair and 3 gallons of paint. "We're starting fresh but not sterile," she announced. "Think home with a history." Also, I brought muffins. And then, surprisingly, my uncle showed up. The same one who handed me the eviction notice on my birthday. He stood at the edge of the porch, holding a battered photo frame. I didn't speak. I just watched him. "This was your grandmother's," he said quietly, holding it out. It was a photo of her standing by the lake, sun hat tilted, arms crossed with that signature look of fierce pride. "I kept it because I missed her. I'm giving it back because I know she'd be proud of you." My eyes burned, but I didn't cry. "You should have protected this place," I said. "I know," he replied. "And I'll spend however long you'll let me making up for that." Rhea didn't come. Not at first. Word was she moved in with a friend across town, licking her wounds and waiting for the gossip to die down. But one afternoon, weeks later, she showed up. No entourage, no flashy car, just her in jeans and a hoodie looking like someone who finally realized the world didn't owe her anything. "I know I'm the last person you want to see," she said, "but I wanted to say I'm sorry, not for getting caught, for everything else." I didn't say anything right away. "You were my cousin," I finally said, "my best friend growing up. And you treated me like a pawn." "I know," she said softly. "I just kept telling myself it wasn't personal, that it was business, but it was personal, and I was selfish. I don't expect forgiveness, but I had to say it." There was a long pause, then I stepped aside. "We're repainting the kitchen. Grab a brush if you mean it." She stared at me. "You serious?" "Only one way to find out." She walked in. That was the turning point. One by one, people began showing up. Neighbors I hadn't seen in years dropped off meals and spare tiles. Local teens offered to clear brush. Even the mayor stopped by, partly for PR, I'm sure, but she left with a promise to block any future commercial bids on lakeside residential properties. By midsummer, the place looked alive again. The porch was stained, the shutters freshly hung. Flowers bloomed along the walkway like they were cheering me on, and then I had an idea. Not revenge, not even a statement. A celebration. Not for me, but for us. For legacy, for truth, for the home that refused to be erased. So I sent out invites. Not formal ones, just handwritten notes on recycled paper. I called it a restoration gathering. I invited everyone, even the ones who hadn't helped. Even the ones who once turned their backs. Because healing isn't always about who stood with you at the worst. Sometimes, it's about who's willing to stand with you now. On the day of the event, I wore a sundress and no shoes. I strung fairy lights from the porch to the trees and let Caleb handle the playlist. Tessa baked 3 pies. Imani set up a painting station for kids. My uncle grilled. Even Rhea brought lemonade. The yard filled with people. Laughter. Music. Dogs chasing each other by the lake. Elders in folding chairs swapping stories about my grandmother. One woman told me she remembered learning how to knit in this cottage when she was a girl. Another swore she once saw a bald eagle from the dock out back. Near sunset, I stood on the porch. I looked out over the crowd, the community I hadn't known I had, the family I thought I'd lost, the home I nearly did. I cleared my throat. "Thank you," I said, voice catching, "for showing up, for believing in second chances. This place, this home, it isn't just mine. It's a story we've all shared in some way. And now, we get to keep writing it." Someone clapped, then more joined in. And then it was a roar, applause echoing through the trees, over the water, into the sky. That night, as the lanterns swayed and laughter drifted up like smoke, I felt it. Not revenge, not victory, something better, peace.